Welcome to the Roniel and DaRon podcast show. I'm DaRon.
And I'm Roniel. Got some interesting things to talk about today. But before we even actually get there, what I would like to ask is, have you seen the actual latest movie that just came out called Black Widow?
No,
Really?
Is it good? No, not yet. Is it good?
Well, maybe because I'm the first person to kind of I like to see the movie way before the date that it's coming out. So it was I'll say it was pretty good, but it was okay. You say mediocre. Reason why I say that is because they already, now today in these trailers, they're showing you every part of the movie. Like you already get everything or already know everything about the movie. So I kind of went in like, I seen that in the trailer. I seen that in the trailer. Yeah. So only thing that kind of surprised me, which again, if you see the movie, if you're a big fan of Taskmaster, that was a surprising factor because knowing the comic book and how, who Taskmaster is, it's a surprising who you find out who that is. But other than that, that was the only surprise. Everything else was like, I seen that. But I just wondered, has there been any interesting movies you've seen, so far?
Lately?
Or are you kind of like, yeah?
Honestly, there's been a bit of a dearth. I have been very thankful Netflix keeps putting out stuff that's
oh, man.
Good. Yeah.
Remember when they went through this drought stage where they didn't have anything on there? And you're like, what is getting boring? Why do I pay for this? And now they actually have a collage of everything. So It's like pretty cool. So that is interesting. But however, I just wanted to see if you seen anything interesting. But if anybody hasn't, you still should go check out Black Widow. And then this month coming, Snake Eyes. I'm really excited about that one. So definitely should see that. But however, I think today I would like to talk about discussing some of the mistakes you made in your career, whether that's security or any other thing you may have done besides security, but just getting to that point of your career that you wanted to be in. And then I would also like to talk about a little bit in that segment how you actually got or knew that you wanted to do what you were doing. Like, how did you get to that point of knowing what you wanted to do in your career, even though you made certain mistakes getting to that path?
Okay. So at least for me, I'll say I knew probably starting around 15, 16 in general what it was I wanted to do. I was helped out a little bit because actually when I was 15, I got my first letter from the NSA. We won't say why, but that just solidified that there was in fact a career for what I was doing, and there was a desire by the government to have people like me in some capacity. So what I went through and did from there was work with the government, with the military specifically, before I joined Booz Allen. And that was after I got a bachelor's in computer science. So that actually, I think we've discussed before, but I won't say I didn't learn anything from my bachelor's, because I did, but it was relatively limited. What I did learn was very high level, as far as mine was from a standard college, a liberal arts college, as compared to a technical school. We've discussed the differences between the two already. And what that wound up meaning was, because mine's actually a bachelor's in science, I had to take a lot of science classes and things of that nature, but we also had to take a lot of electrical engineering, mathematics, things like that kind of classes. And it was good because it gave me a very well-rounded education, in addition to the stuff that I already came in knowing. When I was a young child, I'm sure like you, I did things. Yeah,
you tinkered around a little bit, huh?
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Yeah, a little curiosity, a little, you know how you have those two things on your shoulder.
That's right.
One telling you to do it and one telling you not to do it. Don't do it. Don't do it, Ron. Don't do it.
That's right. And I was always a big. I was just always curious. I've always been curious. I was never malicious. Well, okay, let me rephrase that. I was generally not malicious. I was typically curious.
Generally not religious. Yeah, we're gonna skip past that one.
Yeah,
But yeah,
we'll move on from there.
yeah, but it's a good thing to be curious, and I think that some people that they need to understand that, especially coming into this field or any of these fields with that deals with a that scientific mindset. I'm not saying only scientific mindset, but a technical aspect that you definitely have to be curious, not only having a passion, but take curiosity. Like, why does this work the way it works? And if I take this apart, what's in it?
Right.
And can I put it back together, but can I make it do something that it wasn't supposed to?
Right.
So.
Right. And before I joined Booz Allen, actually, I had already been doing contract work and things of that nature. And I had been working with, like I said, government systems, military systems for a little bit. We've been repairing military computers, setting up networks, just a whole bunch of stuff, installing software, all that kind of stuff. And I think where I started was fine. And it was actually a pretty good path considering. But what wound up happening, long story short, is after I graduated from college, I looked to see where I could get hired full time to really, truly just go wholeheartedly in security. And the first place that I looked was, of course, in my area, which was the Denver area, places like that. And IBM was they had just, I think, bought Black Ice.
Okay.
I don't know if you ever used them.
Yeah, I didn't like it that much, but yeah.
So they had just bought Black Ice. There was an IBM. There was an IBM location nearby where I was, and it was an obvious choice. So I went through. I interviewed with them. That all went well. But what came of that was I actually turned them down, and I'm glad I did, because they were only offering $50,000. Now, this is going to get into a mistake I made, and I promise I'm getting there.
Yeah, go ahead.
What I passed because I knew 50,000 was ridiculously low for our industry, especially at the time. And I knew what they wanted me to do. And they talked about, casual dress, it's a relaxed work environment, the standard stuff, because this was an entity that had been absorbed recently by IBM, but they didn't have IBM's culture. Okay. And that's important to recognize. So when we talk about these really big companies, they have a very specific culture, and they tend to be very rigid, very stuck in their ways. And when their culture moves, heaven help you if you don't go along with it.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I passed and I wound up going, we instead moved to California, where I then got hired by Booz Allen Hamilton. And that was for 78 or 75,000, something like that. And that was good. That was very fortuitous. My brother was stationed at Pendleton at the time. This was before he died. And so before he wound up going overseas, we were able to spend time with him. And I will tell you, the amount I was getting paid in San Diego was grossly insufficient, by the way. First and foremost, it wasn't really my first job. It wasn't even my second job, okay? But because I wanted to strictly go into a field, and it's a big company, and I really wanted to do the things that they were doing, I took a hit pay-wise that I should not have taken. I should have pressed for a little more. Now, keep in mind, 78 at that time was, it was about on par with what you would expect from entry level, but it was in Southern California.
Wait a minute. Can I stop you right there?
Please.
You entry level?
Yeah. You're right. It actually was. I say entry level. It wasn't even an entry level position. I'm glad you mentioned that. I say entry level. It was the consultant level 2,
okay,
which is not really entry level. Sorry, you're right.
Yeah.
Because I did have prior work history, because I had work with the government, with the military specifically. But that's what I would have called entry-level pay.
Yeah.
And especially because I did have a degree, I had the prior experience. I knew what I was doing. I knew the language, all this other stuff. I took less than I should have. And a lot of that comes down to I had a young family, and we needed money. So I'm not going to say I took the first big company that went with me, because as I said, I actually left. We moved because I did not like the offerings we were getting where we were. And that is something people need to remember. And we did. So I've moved my entire life. In fact, actually, before I left high school, we had moved, I think it was 13 times for me.
Okay.
And actually, it may even have been more. We'd moved a lot, and I had been to more schools than there are grades. Okay, so that just gives you an idea of how often we move. So I'm very good at moving. I don't like to, I hate moving now, especially. But I'm very good at it. And we literally packed everything onto a U-Haul, drove it down straight to San Diego. And, within just 2 months, I think, I'd picked up the job at Booz Allen. This was in the middle this was in the beginning throes of a big recession, around the 2017 timeframe. Sorry, 2007 timeframe.
I was about to say the recession was like 2007, 2008 all the way to, yeah.
Yeah, 2007. I've lived a long life. I've had a lot of jobs. Dates are not important.
I was literally about to say 2017. Was I in a recession? Were we in a recession in 2017? I don't remember that.
Well, the trade war with China.
Yeah. Please, when you say China, you remind me of somebody. So you know where I'm getting at. But yeah.
All right. So I will tell you, I took a hit there that I should not have pay-wise. I should have bargained for more. And that was completely, utterly, totally on me. All right. So first and foremost, we've talked a little bit about this. Don't ever undervalue yourself. Don't overvalue yourself grossly either, because then you'll never get anything. We've had people who sat there and wanted $150,000 to be a Windows system administrator. I've seen people asking for $200,000, $300,000 for Windows system administration, which is a joke. There's no reason you should be asking for that much. Yes.
I can do that in my sleep.
I know. My children can all do that. Actually, my boys are right now taking college courses. All 3 of them could do it. All of them. And the youngest is 13. So, I mean, not to disparage Windows system administrators out there, but it's true.
And I will say, I think Linux is way more more complex and difficult than doing Windows system administration.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
So now I actually wound up putting myself on a good pathway, because I have I've done a lot of government work. I've worked with the government and all this other stuff. I've done a lot of contracting work. So I've worked on a lot of different systems in a lot of different ways. And, when you come from a field, when you come from a job where you didn't make much, $75,000, $78,000 seems like a lot of money. But again, remember, we moved from a place that actually wasn't expensive to one that's considerably more pricey. And that makes a huge difference, and that's something you have to keep in mind. But I made a similar mistake, actually, when I went with Highland. And I want to get to this one, because this was, to me, this was the biggest non-technical mistake I've made. I left a position I had been at. I think I'd been there at that point for either 8 or 9 years. And I didn't completely leave. I just moved to casual. I was part-time with them, the company I was still at. And I went to Highland. Long story short, I made a big mistake going to Highland. And what had happened was I wasn't looking for anywhere. Highland reached out to me. and we talked about it, and they made a lot of promises and said a lot of things, all of which turned out to be false. So I sat there and they said things like, oh, well, you'll be helping build up the team. You'll be starting it from scratch, which was not true. The team was actually, for all intents and purposes, completely built by the time I came on. You'll be training them, and that actually did happen to a degree, sort of. And you'll be leading the team. You'll be in charge of all of application security and the entire team, so on and so forth. And they made it sound like it was a leadership management position, but it was still technical, a technical lead. And then when I got there, of course, that simply wasn't the case. I left there within a year. And what that wound up doing was that actually set my career back, if you look at the math, about 2 years. It didn't set it back technically, from a technical perspective. It set it back from a pay, from benefits, from where I was, and all of this other stuff. Now, the company I was at was more than happy to take me back. They were extraordinarily happy that I wanted to come back. They weren't happy that the situation had turned out the way it did, because my management actually really likes me, and so they take good care of me. And I think that's one of the biggest parts of this mistake was I left a company where I was well taken care of for another company. Yes.
Yeah, to go to a company that didn't really give a crap about you.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's something people really need to be aware of. You really have to pay attention. And I did talk to people who had been at that company. And one of the important things about that organization, on that note, I'd like to see if we can discuss some of the mistakes from a non-technical perspective that you've made in your career that have been either stumbling blocks or perhaps at least slow down your progress. Slow down, number one, where you want to be now as compared to where you actually are. And then number two, where you expect or hope to be in the future.
Well, I have to start back saying, and hopefully this will meet the non-technical perspective, but not even knowing that this was a career and going into how I got into getting, knowing this was a career, but not even knowing that it was a career, knowing that, like we discussed, I started off hacking at an early age, and not even knowing that this was a thing because you always heard this was illegal. But I think one of my biggest mistakes that pushed me back a lot was not going to a traditional college. And going to a trade school, that really hindered me a lot because I spent at least, and we're talking about just an associate degree, I spent maybe I want to say it was supposed to be 2 years, or maybe 3 years, maybe 3.5, literally trying to get an engineering degree because I thought, electrical engineering, computer electronic engineering is what I really wanted to kind of get into. Only to find out that, one, the pay was not as great. And I wasn't going to be an engineer per se. It started out like maybe an engineer technician.
Right.
So that hindered me a lot because I wasted time in a field that I wasn't getting any value in. I wasted all that time learning. Now, again, the stuff I learned was great. It was practical, but it set me back to what I really wanted to do and not knowing that security was a career. And then once I found out security was a career, it was too late anyway, because we were in a recession. Around 2008, I got out of, IT tech. Don't go there, by the way, even though they're shut down, but you just stop going to trade schools. Go to a traditional school if you're going to go to college. So 2008, recession hit. I wasn't able to find any jobs, even in the field, even in electronic engineering or whatever. I wasn't able to get anything. And if they did, it was $9 an hour.
Right.
I was not going to work for $9 an hour. So my thing was, okay, I wanted to get into IT. So I spent years and years, every year, trying to get myself closer to an IT job because there was no roadmap on how to get to security. Back then there was no way or nobody telling you, oh, this is how you do it, or this is how I did it, or this is how you can do it. So I had no roadmap to how could I get to this point in my career. So I've been jumping from job to job because I could only get a temporary job. contract to hire. So that pushed me back really far, but it was a good thing because it was able to give me experience in a variety of things in IT. And it taught me, all the moving pieces you needed in order to be able to have a successful career or in the field. So that kind of pushed me back years. I mean, I don't think I got my first real security job into 2015.
So, out of curiosity, because this is actually, that path is not unique, that's a semi-common path. Do you feel like the temp agency, the fact that you went through a temp agency, so I imagine on your resume, and please correct me if I'm wrong, imagine on your resume it shows short stints at different places. Do you feel like that may have made some organizations that you wanted to go to less inclined to hire you because when they see your resume, they see what is effectively job hopping?
So some places they would ask me, but it was the reason why I would get some of the jobs that I did get was because I would tell them why. They could understand when we were looking at the recession period. Mm-hmm. I mean, you wasn't able to get anything, so they can understand why. So I think it kind of hindered a little bit from people wanting to do things because they didn't know, they didn't have something to go off of.
Right.
But at the same time, explaining what happened and what had happened, they could relate because everybody was going through that stage in their life. So I think it was the pro and the con, but it didn't really affect me as much because, like I said, at that time I was really just trying to build myself up,
right,
and also trying to find a way to go back to school. But I think it's a pro and a con. So
it gives you a lot of different experiences, but it also leaves you having to explain something. And if someone doesn't give you the chance to explain it,
then it's going to be a problem, especially trying to get a job. And if we go to my first, this is very funny. I think I told you this before. When I got out of IT Tech, my first information security interview was at Hurricane Labs. I forgot his name. I think his name is Bill, Bob, or whatever. He's a very nice, smart guy, but he literally showed me what I needed to know. He literally asked me, but he didn't kind of give me a chance to explain as much, but he just forget it. Let's go to the interview. Asked me 3 questions. And if those 3 questions were right, and I got 2 out of the 3, but he was like, no, pretty much I knew then that I needed to go back to the drawing board because I didn't know what I needed to be a network security engineer. Mm-hmm. But I didn't even know what the hell a network security engineer was anyway. So, I just trying to get my foot in the door some way.
Right.
I mean, they didn't really, if you could look at it that perspective, he didn't really, I think that hindered me there because you could see all of the jobs that I was going from and didn't have any real long-term work experience.
Right.
So that was an issue, but finally, like I said, when I got to go to a traditional college, got accepted in 2010, which was another issue. This becomes another mistake. It draws on to the mistake I made with ITT Tech, not knowing that it wasn't I think more regional. I think they were, what were they, nationally accredited? Not regionally. It was one of them. But they wasn't accredited to the point where the colleges accepted that degree.
ITT Tech, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, ITT Tech was I think it was either one national or regional, but they were only accredited in one thing. So other colleges, real colleges, did not accept the degree. Now, they did have programs that I could, transfer those credits into. But if I wanted to go into a computer science per se degree, those credits wouldn't translate over. So I had to start all over again. And it was really, really Henderson, because I was I did all of this work. I took all of these classes. I took programming classes and they did not translate or transfer over to a computer science degree. So that set me back another 5 years to get my degree in computer science, and hoping that I could get out and get the foundation I needed to be able to get a career in security. So I'd been chasing that dream that whole time. Once I figured out, oh, I can do this, and I kind of figured that out. If I go back a little bit, when I was working at PNC, as you could see on my like maybe on even LinkedIn, that I worked at PNC as an IT service desk analyst, and there was a few help desk people, like especially tier 2, and I was in the entry level, that were, this one guy was literally, he was just so obsessed with security. I mean, he was one of those guys that carried the security book all day around him and walked happily and proud with his chin up, trying to be that guy. So, and then, going to Nauticon and kind of seeing that when I was around, that this was a thing. So that kind of gave me a glimpse that, okay, I can do this for a living. And like I said, if we go fast forward, first get my first job in 2015. As a security engineer working for Explorers that got, bought out by IBM. My biggest mistake there was not knowing what I was worth and undervaluing myself.
Right.
I didn't really understand negotiation. And, my thing was, well, this company is paying me $55,000. You got to pay me 55 or better.
Right.
And they're going to take whatever the first number you spit out, they're going to take that. They don't care too much about you. If they can get you, you may be really good, but if they can get you for a low price, they won and you lost. So, literally what happened is I had a job set up for a Goodyear. Goodyear was paying me $55K. I'm not going to go into their horrible HR process because it was horrible. Like, there was a reason why I left that place, because literally HR was horrible. That lady was horrible. But then I went over, got a job at IBM, and I kind of got paid the same amount, $55K, with a computer science degree and an electronic engineering degree, associate. So literally, and whatever little experience I gained from being in a temp agency, none of that really mattered. It kind of went out the window. Like, right. That was way above entry level. Like, 55K, come on, that's a joke.
Right. Well, and to your point, actually, it's really common, especially for military personnel. And this is actually what I was trying to hint at before. You'll see a lot of military personnel and they'll get out. And so they're used to making nothing. And they'll have, maybe it's just 4 years, maybe it's 8, maybe it's 16, maybe it's even 20 years of experience. And then they'll go to these big companies, IBM, Boeing, Booz Allen, Hamilton, and they'll be like me, getting a senior consultant, so a level 2 position, and making maybe $80,000 at best, just ridiculously low amounts of money. And they don't understand the way that world works and that negotiation process. They're used to something different. And I don't know. It's hard when you're young, and it's hard when you transition from one sector, so to speak, to another. And I understand, of course, people would say, well, military versus military contractor, is that really a sector change? And I would say yes, because one has very set pay structure and the other doesn't. One, you have to fight for your pay, and the other you don't. But
yeah, total different thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, I really, and it still happens today, and I'm kind of going to go back into some other things that set me off or set me back from getting to reaching my full potential. Not only not knowing what I'm worth and undervaluing myself, but being Black in IT per se too. Because if you notice, as I noticed at the time, that there was more, Caucasian people that were in the IT sector or in security in general, and there wasn't a lot of Black people that you would see, or a mixture of race, like minorities in the field.
Yeah, I'm non-existent in it. You're non-existent in it.
So it really put me back, because it's like, oh, like every time reason why I undervalued or questioned myself is because like you had people that made you feel like you shouldn't be there, which is one thing I feel like people shouldn't do that. Everybody has a role and play a role. And when you get those multitude of a variety of different people, like, minorities and different people from different countries, you can get a different way of thinking.
Right.
Everybody has a different way of thinking, and you may think one way, but you think another, and you put all those together, you come up with a very unique situation, and a really good team at that. So that kind of hindered me too, because it was like, oh, you're black. I had braids, so I looked ghetto. So another thing that kind of made me wonder is, should I cut my hair? Do I have to look this certain way to be accepted? Like I told you, when I worked at Geek Squad as a computer technician, and I was way overqualified to work there. But there was this guy that looked exactly like the Verizon character, had the glasses, the hair, the smooth hair back, everything. He just had everything going from it, little, flooded pants and everything. And me, I had to literally, you're going to laugh at me, I had braids at the time, but I literally had to wear a pocket protector with my white shirt and black pants and fake glasses just to get somebody to come up and talk to me. It didn't matter how much I knew or whatever. Now these are not fake, but these are actually real glasses. But then I had to wear glasses that looked like their glasses just to give that impression that I knew what I was talking about. And that goes back to me again. I don't feel like I have to do that. Back then I didn't understand how much I was worth or how much, I should value myself, but that's something that you really need to take in, perspective. Like, you need to know what you're worth. And as you said, you don't want to go overboard,
Right.
But, you want to know what you're worth and make sure that you get paid what you're worth. So with that being said, that was another thing I think that hindered me from my career, is that I was black and a non-minority field.
Right.
Okay.
Well, can we talk about that a little more? So we have had different experiences, and part of that is, so I stayed in the military side of things. Now, I've mentioned before that whole Marine Corps thing. Anyone who knows about the Marine Corps, it's almost completely white, almost completely male. It's changed a little bit over the years, but especially way back when. And so everywhere we lived, I mean, it was the local population, which, depending on what country or wherever, looks a certain way, plus, mostly white people, so to speak. And of course, my mother being white and all that good stuff. And so for me, race didn't play a deal in my life. It was always national origin, because everywhere you go, you're an American, and that's not a good thing, especially when you're tied to the military, because, I mean, especially if you're talking someplace like Japan, you're the conqueror, you're here, and so it winds up bringing a different flavor. Now, what that means for me and what that has meant for me is, historically, number one, I've been able to see the United States from a different lens than I think a lot of other people do, because I can see it from that outsider perspective. Because the United States, to me, is what I saw generally tied to the military. All right. Now, having said that, we've been stationed in the South a few times, and I will tell you, they treated my family very poorly. Like the fact that my father was married to my mother when we were in Carolinas, it was not a good thing not to the Marines, not to the sailors, but to the civilian population. We wouldn't go out to eat often because we would be very poorly treated. I'm just going to leave it at that. Yeah. And I will just say, I still to this day do not feel welcome in the South in general. I've been, in 2012, I was down south, and we had KKK members decide to hold a rally outside my hotel.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I don't like going down south. I'm not well treated. I don't want to be down there. You've got the whole northern carpetbagger, even though I'm not northern.
Right.
Plus, you add in the fact that I'm not pale, and of course, I look like a lot of Mexicans, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So they see me, and you've got that xenophobia coming into it. But within our industry, within IT is very insulated. Computer science is very insulated, and it is very white, and it's very male. And there are a lot of reasons for that, right? So I guess really, I'm curious from your perspective, how much of what you ran up against was purposeful? How much was what I would say is more that overt racism that I generally have seen in the South versus covert racism that you see normally in the North versus just the fact that you aren't, I'm going to say one of the boys, right? You stick out a little bit for a variety of reasons. Number one, your personality, which is more like my personality. And I would have said that's what you would expect from IT, but it's not. But also the way you dress, the way you carry yourself, because you are interested in being physically fit, and not to stereotype, but a fair number of people within IT aren't. They're not interested in it. And, that's okay. Everyone to each his own, or her own, as the case may be. But how much of this do you really think was just because you're not? So I said previously in a previous one, 72% of the United States is white only, whatever that means. That's according to the last census. And so they're very much the super majority. It's not just a majority, it's a super majority. And we obviously have to understand with any super majority, there's a culture and so on and so forth, and understand all of that. But just how much of that do you think played a role that is a super majority, and how much of it do you think was, in fact, just people who are out to get you because they're racist, they're bigoted, or just because maybe they're uncomfortable around you for one reason or another, because maybe they're afraid of making you mad, maybe they're afraid of you thinking that they're racist, or what have you?
So I'm not going to say people were racist. I don't know, but you can have that suspicion that they were. But when you really think about, and see this, I have to bring this back to the Black culture in the whole, is if you think about my culture, what you see on TV is what you think of everybody.
Right.
What you may think of everybody. Like if I had braids, you think I'm a thug. You don't want to hire me because I'm a thug. Why does that matter? Like there are white people I see that have multicolored hair. Does that look professional?
They're right.
In our end, that's not professional at all.
Right.
But it's okay for them to wear that. So even with me having dreads, this is my choice. That doesn't make me a gangster. That doesn't make me any of that. And whatever I do in my personal life have nothing to do with my job, my work life. But in the same perspective, it's just like, I think a lot of people were scared because of what they see on TV. And they think that and they associate every Black person with that, with that in that category.
Right.
You're a thug. You shouldn't be working here. You don't know nothing about. And then they also think we're stupid. You don't think we know anything. That's kind of how I felt going in this career. It's like, you can't be that smart. You're young. You're dumb. You're a thug. You shouldn't be here.
Right.
And that's kind of how I felt categorized. So if I wasn't white, like I'll give you for say, I used to work at University Hospital. This name is horrible, but just work with me. I took a job for $10 an hour as a scribe. You know how horrible that is? That is the low. You might as well just have called me a peon. Like that is the lowest of the low. A scribe? Okay. So I took a job as a scribe, but the whole job really was taking out phones and putting in Cisco phones. I took out old phones and put in Cisco phones. And then I started building my way into doing more of a VoIP engineering position. I literally was setting up DIDs and everything, setting up the phones and giving them, an IP address in Cisco Manager.
Right.
Now, I did everything the VoIP engineers did. There was just a few things that they did that they didn't allow us to do. But at the same time, I did all of that. I even took out the telephone switches. I would hook up things there. I was even doing this, cleaning the network closet and plugging things up, testing the switches, putting in switches. Right, I was doing all type of stuff, right? But they didn't want to give me the title as a VoIP engineer. One, I'm a black guy doing everything, doing all the stuff they doing, but I was called the scribe, right? And they literally would tell me I cut my hair because they kept calling me a thug. So you look like a thug, man. You should literally, you should probably, cut your hair. And at that time, a mistake for me was I was like, well, maybe I should look. If I want to get the job, maybe I should look that way. Why do I have to change who I am for somebody else? They're not changing who they are.
Right.
I mean, they get to wear the way they want. They get to dress the way they want. They get to do whatever they want. But I have to change the way I look because I look too thuggish. So long story short, the guy I was working with, and I got to say this, he didn't do a damn thing. He was a nice guy and all, but he didn't do a damn thing. I did everything. I put together the plan, how we're going to put these phones in a short amount of time, because it was a 2-year plan that turned into a 1-year plan. Because I was doing all of the work. I was putting in plans, recording where we had everything in Excel, making sure I managed all of those data, setting up, staying late at night to make sure everything worked out right, setting up the phones, going to, the call center and setting up things. I was doing everything. This guy didn't do a damn thing. But at the end of the time, after the end of the contract, guess who got the job? He did. I didn't. I got let go. And because he had more experience being there, even though he didn't do much, they gave him the job.
Okay, so that's actually an interesting mistake. And I want to poke on that just a little further, if you don't mind. So he got the job. Now, how much of that was because you were covering for him, and so they didn't know what he wasn't doing? And how much do you think it was maybe other stuff? Meaning, when you were doing all of this stuff that he should have been doing, how aware was management and everyone else that's what was going on?
I don't think they were aware. They knew I worked closely with management because I had to tell them, like, every week we had to, or every 2 weeks, we had to give them an update on where we were at with the timeline. So at first it was 3 people. It was me and this guy, and then they brought in the guy I was telling you about that got the job. And first it was 3 people. Then they let the other guy go because he wasn't really doing much. This guy, it wasn't much I could say because he had the experience, and plus he was a jerk. He was a cool guy, but he had this old school mentality. Like I was just talking about this earlier today, that when you're older and you come from, I want to say maybe I don't want to make it seem crazy, but maybe the 60s, maybe the 70s, whatever, where you had to work really hard and you had to what is the right word? You had to work your way up. Let's just say that. Right. Work your way up to get to the position of the money you want. That's not how it is today. You don't have to do that. Now, maybe some people are kind of like baby spoon fed and they feel like they don't have to be that way, but I felt like that was where he came from. And it wasn't much I can say. All I could say is, it's like, I feel like all I could do is shut up and just do the job, and that goes to a point that I'm going to reach in Highland, because it was the same similar aspect where I can't say anything. All I can just do is do my job. I was here to do a job, and that's all it is, because we're fighting for who's going to get the contract.
Right.
There's a contract to hire job. So who's going to get the contract? And of course, no matter what I said to them, and I did go and say stuff to, management, but it didn't matter. They didn't really care. As long as the job was completed, I was just a peon. I was just somebody that was expendable. I mean, right. So, I always felt that they were going to give him the job anyway, because he came from, telephony, I can't say it right, telephony type of job.
Yeah, telephony. Telephony.
Telephony or whatever. Yeah, whatever. Like he came from that type of, having that type of experience, and I didn't.
Yeah.
I was trying to gain experience. Now, VoIP engineering wasn't something I wanted to do, but it was definitely a good insight on what I could do. And so they didn't even think I could do it because I didn't have the experience doing it, and I showed them that I could do it very well. But I felt like he had told them something about me or what he felt about me that maybe made them think, well, we don't need him. But I knew they weren't going to give me the contract anyway because of all of the issues I had to go through with being a black guy and predominantly white. Everybody that I worked with there was white. And I was the only black person there when it came to IT. But they never said anything about the network guy sitting in the closet and sleeping. But they had a secure job because they had the experience. They could command what they wanted, right? Me, I was just a 20-year-old guy looking for a career or a start. So a lot of it was things that I really couldn't say anything because I didn't have the experience, knowledge to say anything about.
Right.
And that's kind of how I felt. That's kind of how they made me feel.
Well, and that's an interesting point. So we, of course, have this counterculture going on right now that has its own issues to the point where I think they're working in the opposite direction and they're doing more harm than good because really, I think the takeaway here, there are two pieces. The first is, of course, as an organization, you need to, as a manager, you need to understand what your folks are doing and who's performing and who isn't, right? Because so they chose this other gentleman over you. And he may have been a perfectly fine fellow. He may be absolutely phenomenal. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if you're the one doing most of the work, now you're gone as a result. Who's going to cover for him?
Right.
They're going to have a problem.
And he probably didn't work there that long anyway. Like I said, I'm not trying to say anything about him, but I just know that when you think about it, think about it from this perspective. He was the person that got the job, but I was the one actually running. I literally managed the job. I ran when it came up, when we were stuck in a situation and we couldn't figure out how we were going to do it. My creative mind was like, this is how we can do it and make it work. And he didn't have anything. He just went along with whatever I said. So when you really think about it, I'm not saying either one. And like I said, I'm glad he got got the job, but it was just like, they didn't want to give me a chance anyway. They didn't want to spend all that time trying to teach me, which, me, I'm a fast learner. So I just think that they figured that no matter whether it was my ideas and my creativity that got the job done early, that they needed somebody that could hit the ground running right away.
I think the other important thing to take out of all of this is maybe an appropriate way to discuss your achievements. And this, I think, is something a lot of companies really fail at because I would argue you don't want to hire a narcissist, right?
Right.
Narcissists are not good for unit cohesion because they're all about them. Everything is supposedly their success, and that's simply not the case. Narcissists tend to do the least. I'm not calling this gentleman a narcissist, but most HR processes, particularly tied to compensation, hiring, and things of that nature, really focus on hiring people who are really good at selling themselves, who tend to be narcissistic. I think one of the issues, and this is really something that is a mixture, is number one, people need to learn how to sell themselves better. And number two, organizations need to do a much better job preventing narcissists from joining teams because they will kill a team quickly, but also weeding out the narcissists and doing so in an intelligent, coherent manner. Take your example, and I've seen this a lot. So if I'm trying to hire someone now, and this is a contract for hire position, I actually don't want the person who sells themselves the most. I want the person who does the most, who is most successful, right? And so from my background, of course, I was always taught unit cohesion, unit cohesion, unit cohesion. I don't take compliments well. I don't take And that's mostly because I don't personally handle being selected to be held up in some manner. That bothers me. I don't like attention.
Right.
And a lot of that, of course, is tied to childhood and all of the jobs that I've taken. So you have some organizations within the military where you'll get tons and tons of awards and medals. Mm-hmm. And then you'll have others where you get very few, because, of course, their perspective is you're doing what you're supposed to do. So why would you get a medal? And I was raised in that more Marine Corps mindset. And so I don't take, I do a very bad job self-promoting, and I don't handle compliments well. It makes me feel very weird, and not in a good way. Not when it's in front of a group, right? If you're going to compliment me, if you're going to say something nice about me, do it where it's only you and I. Don't do it in front of other people, because it makes me. It doesn't feel good to me. I don't like attention.
I'm the same way.
Yes,
I'm the same way.
See, and I think that's one of the important things here is that ability to promote yourself. It doesn't come naturally. But certainly not to me, not to you. And that definitely hinders a fair number of careers of people like us who are like us. And I think that also hinders a lot of women's careers, at least within IT. I would argue when you are the minority, you'll see two polar opposites. You'll see some people who are egoists, right? And then you'll have the other side where they really don't want that attention. They want to be praised. They want their work to be recognized, just not publicly.
Yeah. Yeah, because it becomes very weird and awkward at that point.
Right.
And
right. Management needs to do a better job seeing that, and a better job understanding those different personalities, so that people like you and I can succeed more. Now, I've been very lucky because I have stayed in the government sector. I've stayed in the military sector for almost my entire career. Yes, I do non-military stuff. I do a lot of other stuff, but my main focus has been military. The main focus of most of my organizations has been military. And so for me, I'm among people who are more like me in general. Not always. There are egoists in the military. I want to be clear, they do exist. But it's a different mindset in general. And the problem when you go to a corporate environment is I haven't found a corporate environment where that is the case. Every corporate environment I've ever seen has been, the more of a blowhard you are, the further you will go.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a typical thing, that if you are that type of way, then you will go very far. And you've seen that in some people at Highland too, that, they kissed up a lot in order to get where they wanted to go. And that only gets you so far, because eventually you're going to be put in a situation where you have to prove yourself.
Right.
And that's the difference. I always used to say that if you put me in front of anybody, I don't care who it is, they can be the top in the industry. If you give me an opportunity, I can prove it. I can always prove my skill set, but sometimes you have an opportunity to even prove your skill set.
Right.
But I feel like I can do that. You can put me up in front of anybody. But but I'm not kissing anything. So I'm either gonna get it or I'm not. But I'm not going to do that to try to get into the industry. And that's kind of what it was. Like, because I wouldn't do certain things, or because I wasn't I stopped getting to the point where I was complacent and I'm going to follow I'm going to do this because they said so, because this is the way to be. I got to be like them in order to be, in the industry. And then when you really think about it, I'm never going to be like them.
Right.
I'm who I am for a reason, and it is what it is. But I think people, it just goes back to loving yourself, loving who you are, and being proud of who you are, and going, and pushing yourself from there, pushing yourself to reach those goals. And I tell people, like I had told you, I talked to a guy in the field about where to go, which way he should go, and how he should go about it, because him being a minority, it's going to be pretty hard. But and as you see nowadays, people are trying to go for the quickest thing to get them in the field, thinking that's going to help, not knowing that won't. So, like we say, like the security programs,
right,
that they have per se, people don't think about it. They're not. A lot of them are not security professionals, and these programs are being slapped together on what they think or what they see, or online, or in the what they per se see in the field that you should know, but it's not really what you need to. It's not what you should be learning. Like, you're not going to learn, like cryptography. They're not going to really teach you what you need to know in it. So they're going to give you a basic general what all these old encryption algorithms are, and have you write some of them or look at them, use them, and you're not even looking at that anymore. You're not even, like, those are deprecated. Those are not even secure anymore. Like, they're not giving you a good grasp of everything you need. You're going to need and use in the field. So it's like, doesn't translate. So I told him that, to me, I think you need to build yourself off a foundation.
Right.
And until there is a good security program focus in college, which probably be a while before that ever happens.
Never.
I still think, yeah, you're right. I think computer science is a good foundation for anybody trying to get into the field, because you need to understand how things work. And as we talked about, everything is software.
Right.
Hey, there's hardware, but everything runs with software. So hardware doesn't run without software. Okay, of course you could make things that flash lights and shit like that, but we're talking about, if you're really thinking about some of these things you're using, like your phone, it runs on software. So my thing, even when we talk about networking, network protocols are a program, right? It's written in some language. So how can you understand how to break something if you don't understand how it was built and how it was written? If you don't understand code or the language that is written in, how can you actually know whether it's insecure or not? That's what I look at. Like, so when people say, and I've been told this in my career, that if you don't know networking, you're not going to be good. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a basic, but you don't have to be a network guru to be, a security professional. Like, there's a bunch of network gurus, I'm sure that can hack anything.
Right. Yes.
They couldn't exploit a service to save their life. So that goes back to me, having a good foundation in computer science will help you be, for your future in security. It'll help you be, get a better idea of, how things work and how insecure they are.
Yes. I think it is definitely important. So you should learn a lot about a lot of things. And we've talked about that before, and a large part of that comes down to, it's going to help you learn how to abstract your knowledge in a meaningful way. And then the problem when you talk about those computer security and cybersecurity degrees and all that other stuff, just like what you're saying, they fail to give you the actual groundwork that you need in anything, in networking, in software, in programming languages, in operating systems, in processors and microprocessors and input output, all that good stuff. You don't get any understanding of that kind of thing, and it's only security, but it's really very high level security, and that doesn't actually do anyone any good at all. If I'm hiring someone for security, I don't want someone who's, pie in the sky, high level security, because we discussed this a time or two ago. Actually, we discussed this last episode. When you create a report, one of the key things your customers want to know, or when you're talking to and advising someone, is how do they solve a problem? If all you have is very high level, and I'm going to use the term theoretical, and I don't mean this in the derogatory term, fashion many people use it, but a high level theoretical security, and you don't understand the software, you don't understand architectures, you don't understand any of that kind of stuff, you're wasting everyone's time because they won't be able to use it. And that will just make them think less of you. And so ideally, I think most people, so the first 7 years, I was doing this all without a computer science degree. And I already knew a lot because I had been tinkering and doing stuff since I was a child, right? So like you, tearing apart computers and software and everything else. But that degree really, in a good program, gives you those fundamentals that you won't get on the job.
Yeah, that's true. Because, they expect you to have that already.
Yes.
When you go to the job or get into your, position, they expect you to already have that. Because a lot of jobs, especially if you're trying to be a consultant or penetration tester or something like that, you literally already should be hitting the ground running. Mm-hmm. You don't have time to hold your hand. You should have these foundations. And especially if we go back to what we were talking about in application security, which is one of the hardest fields to be in, because you have to know all of these different things, and you really have to have that foundation and, skill set. Otherwise, if you don't have that, then you're going to fail.
Right.
Sorry. It's just the truth.
Everything will be magic to you. And that's something we talked about before. And that's something that a lot of people really need to recognize, is without that underlying foundational knowledge, everything is magic. And if everything is magic, then you don't really understand it. So you can't actually do it on your own successfully and in an intelligible fashion. And that's why if you look at it, all of the pioneers of security, and I mean real security, not Kevin Mitnick, social engineering bullshit. Real security.
Wait. You mean that social engineering is not the biggest thing?
No.
You left somebody out. You left somebody out. Maybe you don't want to say his name, but you left somebody out. Social engineering was the key.
I'm not going to say that guy's name. I'm not saying that guy's name either. I shouldn't, no, he's not even worth mentioning.
Oh man, that's funny. But go back to what you were saying. But it was just funny that you said that social engineering, because everybody at one point, and you could tell me, just piggyback off of that real quick before you go into your point, but social engineering was made of this big thing that is the way that you get in. That's not the only way. That's just a portion. Like, there's so many areas, but that was a big thing that you could use only social engineering and get into any company.
Well, and you're exactly right. So, all right, you have teams that run around, and social engineering is their big thing. They run these big campaigns, and of course, what you were alluding to with the whole social engineering toolkit and things of that nature. And that's how they make their name. But here's the thing. Anyone can do social engineering. Anyone. That's non-technical. It is considered a non-technical skill.
Yeah.
It doesn't require training. It doesn't really require anything. I mean, you look at it, and not to be ugly about it, but every military since time immemorial has been hosed through social engineering on the part of untrained, unskilled women. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm sure everyone can figure out what profession they were doing when they gathered this intel and then gave it to their side.
But who coined the term? Because I think it's ridiculous to call it social engineering when it's more like manipulation than it is social engineering. Like, people have been manipulating people from time to time for years now. But to name it social engineering, what are you engineering when you're socially talking to people? You're not engineering shit. Yeah. But maybe there is a thought to it for you. But to me, I think that's an over-exaggeration of the term, because it's really just manipulation. Maybe that this doesn't sound as flashy, but when I always thought of social engineering, I always thought that was a dumb term that somebody wanted to make look better than what it was.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that goes to our prior discussions on things like, consultant in
Yeah.
the industry. I'm not a penetration tester. I'm a security consultant kind of deal.
Well, I think people didn't, because think about it. I told you the story. When I told my grandma I was a penetration tester, what did she say? She thought I was doing porn. And I'm like, no, I'm not a porn star. I never thought about that. But, maybe people thought it, was too weird. But whoever came up with penetration tester, that was the dumbest name. I know that hacker is a derogatory thing because of, the news nowadays. But, I mean, it is what it is. That's what you are. I mean, an ethical hacker is bullshit.
Yeah.
You're just a hacker. It is. You're somebody that likes to break things.
Right.
Or are curious and want to see how it works. But this whole penetration tester, consultant, all this, I mean, what's next? What about the six, what is it, about 6 or 7 names in one? Cybers, security engineer, penetration tester, cybersecurity penetration tester engineer, lead. Like what is that?
Senior principal cybersecurity expert.
Professional.
Yeah, exactly. Just tack all these things on, the longer the title. And that, of course, is based on grammar. The way every language works, the longer the string is, the more important it is.
The more prestigious you look, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, that is crazy, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, to go back off you were saying, I'm sorry.
No. That's exactly right. So you had social engineering, of course, became this big deal and all of this other kind of stuff, but there's no actual skill tied to social engineering. And you'll see all these people, and they'll post different ways that they breach physical security on low security facilities. Okay. So I've done a lot of training. I've taught a lot of professional armed forces and things of that nature for how to secure physical environments, particularly of critical assets. So nuclear, radiological infrastructure, and top secret facilities, so on and so forth. And tied to that, of course, we do demonstrations and things of that nature. And what people don't recognize is how simple it is outside of the super secure environments to break into a building. It's not a technical thing. And some people will actually greatly harm their career because what they'll focus on are these soft skills, these non-technical skills, social engineering. Tied to that, of course, you have things like dumpster diving and so on and so forth. I remember when that was such a big deal. Everyone, dumpster diving. Anyone can get in dumpster diving. You have kids break into teenagers break into facilities all the time to go drink and do things of that nature. It's not a hard thing to do. And
if you see anybody if I see anybody dumpster diving, I would have thought they were like a hobo or something, like somebody on the street. Like, I'm not going to dumpster dive, to get there are other ways to get into companies. And I mean, if we're talking about it, going dumpster diving, yeah, I know there's secrets there, but now that we're more like socially driven online, you can find a lot of secrets in GitHub, which has become the new dumpster diving. You don't see people getting into dumpsters anymore than you do seeing them looking at your repos.
Right. And they run strings or grep on it, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And there's no skill involved in that either.
Nope.
But to me, there's a big delineation between social engineering and the actual hard skills. And I think, so people need to recognize if what you're trying to do is a hard skill, you definitely don't want to go with a cybersecurity degree or any of that kind of stuff. You really have to get that foundation. And it doesn't matter if you're like me, where you cut your teeth on working on systems for the military or within the government and things of that nature, or for a corporation or what have you. If you don't have that foundation, then it is going to be magic. And that magic is going to it will stunt your career. And it will hold you back because you won't be able to do a lot of the fancy stuff because you won't understand it. Having said that, being a computer scientist, being a system administrator, being a network administrator, so on and so forth, does not guarantee that you'll understand this stuff either. So I've worked with many thousands of developers, administrators of all shades and colors with varying degrees, varying years of experience, things of that nature. And I will tell you the vast majority of them would not do well in security, and they would not be successful in security. They're very good at what they do, but they don't have the temperament for it. They don't have the knowledge, and they don't have the necessary curiosity, nor are they able to abstract that data. And so just going off and getting a computer science degree won't make you successful. You have to have a certain mindset. You have to have a certain philosophy. You have to have a drive. We've talked about that before. You need to make sure that whatever you're doing is something that you're passionate about, something that you love to do.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that you have to have that curiosity, creativity, and passion. So otherwise, you won't be successful. Now, I would like to really quickly. This is going to kind of tie into what you're saying because we talked about this before, but now that we talked on a few episodes about consultant versus contractor, I would like to add in this other variable from bug bounty versus contractor versus consultant. And the reason why I'm saying that is because people are thinking that they can go into bug bounties and without actually getting a foundation. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't tinker around because when people started, maybe they didn't have degrees. A lot of hackers don't have degrees; they're just learning and by tinkering. But I still feel like you have to have a further foundation in order to be able to get to be more advanced or advance your knowledge, and not just utilizing a bug bounty program or just per se. But what are your thoughts on that?
All right.
And do you think? And one more question: do you think people were making a mistake by doing so?
I would say yes. And the reason why I would say that, so first and foremost, I'm actually generally against bug bounties for a variety of reasons. I think corporations would do better to pull that in-house and then pay for an external entity to give them a real assessment, a real penetration test, a real what have you, audit. I don't really care what you want to call it. There are a lot of reasons why I say that, but bug bounties are generally done by companies that are trying to be cheap. And they would give you this baloney about, so many eyes will be on it this way. And that's simply not the case. If that were the case, then open source wouldn't have as many vulnerabilities as it does. Then the Linux kernel wouldn't have the vulnerabilities that it does that sit for a decade and a half, 2 decades. OpenSSH, OpenSSL wouldn't have these same vulnerabilities. So that this whole many eyes on it thing is baloney, because if the eyes that are on it aren't competent and aren't able to look across the whole thing and understand it all, then you don't really have a million eyes on it. You have a few eyes on very specific portions, and those eyes may be incompetent. Now, here's the thing. So bug bounties. Most of the people who are running bug bounties, who are doing bug bounties, I should say, are one-trick ponies, okay? Now, here's the problem. If you say, well, I want to get started in this industry, so I'm going to start with bug bounties. Here's the problem. More likely than not, you're only going to be going for a couple of different vulnerability types. There are a few reasons for that. Most of these bug bounty programs limit what you can do, and they limit what they will accept, okay? Also, most of the time, if you come up with something that's novel or that they don't know and don't recognize, meaning it's anything other than SQL injection, cross-site scripting, maybe cross-site request forgery, then the company is not going to pay you for anything that you find, because they'll just argue it and say it's invalid, and then they're going to go off and secretly fix the vulnerability, and you'll get nothing. So the point being, from the perspective of someone who's trying to learn, I would not recommend it. Now, what I would recommend instead is feel free to go through and grab the code or look at the system and play with the system. But that's different than going through and doing an actual being engaged in and focused on bug bounties. that's using this as an opportunity to examine or test a system that you wouldn't necessarily have the ability to otherwise. So it gives you that experience, but don't focus on it from that bug bounty perspective because they're too locked in, way too locked in. And it will actually stunt your growth very, very, very quickly. And you will become like so many bug bounty folks and a one-trick pony. So you've seen, I discuss a lot of different vulnerabilities. And I have found many different kinds of vulnerabilities. And it's all very complicated. If all I ever had done, bug bounties weren't even a thing when I started. Because I started, unofficially, I started before 2000, but officially, my first job in security was in 2000, and it proceeded from there. They simply didn't exist, and I'm glad that they didn't exist because I think there maybe would have been pressure for me to move in that direction, and it would have negatively impacted my career prospects. If I see someone who largely focuses on bug bounties, I'm not going to take them seriously. I won't. If that's what their resume and experience is based on, then it's a quick, easy pass for me, because I recognize the limitations that individual will have had in experience and knowledge. And I also recognize how simple most bug bounties are to do.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. That's something I really wanted to get your perspective on because, everybody's thinking, especially since bug bounties hit the scene and became a big thing, that's the way to go to get your experience. And then you'll see some people, they'll go and they'll say, oh, just focus on this one thing. And everybody see them making all of this money and doing all of this thing. And this is like a get rich quick scheme.
That's what I was thinking.
And it's the same thing that happened with computer science. And you start weeding out those people that are actually really good or not. But, you see a bunch of people that I'm not going to say that bug bounties are not good for some people. Like if you already have the skills and already have the experience and that's something you want to do on the side, fine. But I don't, and as I said before, I don't agree that it's the best way to start. Again, I believe getting your computer science degree is a good foundation. I believe tinkering, playing with things, getting your hands dirty is a good way to do it. And as I always say, if you've never done it before or never been on that side, then you don't really know what it's like to be an attacker,
right,
or a hacker. And that's my thing. And like I'm not saying everybody started that way, but like I told you, like most people don't have that. So when I'm explaining, like per se with Highland, when I was explaining to an individual about how an attacker would go to an attack, if I was the attacker, knowing that I've seen that side, what would I have done? And how did it really play out? Which is why I don't like really penetration testing, because it's not realistic. Some of the things they are doing are not realistic. It's not what's really happening. So it's as good as you're going to get, but it's not realistic to what an attack would look like, and per se. So when I tell people, oh, that's not how that really works in the real world, what do you mean? I'm like, well, that's the problem, because you've never done it or never seen it, never been around it. You just kind of jumped in here, got your hands dirty, did some CTFs and ran some Nesta scanners and did all of this and Nmaps and think that, oh, this is hacking. That's not hacking. That's not what it is. That's not how it's done. And as I told that individual, he could not understand the concept of how this would work. So he thought that I didn't know what I was doing because, oh, that's not how that works. No, it is how it works. But I wasn't going to go into depth on how I know how it works. But the fact that he thought the commercial word of what hacking is how it really is done now, or back in the days, or underground. And like we talked about, there's no such thing as command and control servers.
Right.
So, people don't understand that. But, as you said, you have to beef things up. People like to beef things up to make them more than what they appear.
Right.
And to me, it's just a selling point. If I can sell you and give you all these terms and all these crazy new things, which is nothing new, then that would get me more money. and I can be able to sell my services. You know what I'm saying? But all you're doing is watering down the industry.
I agree.
Which is a big mistake.
It is. And that's one of the keys here. So if what we're really after in this discussion is trying to help people, and it is trying to help people avoid some of the pitfalls that we have ourselves run into. And again, this one is non-technical. Then I think people need to remember, number one, to listen to those around you with experience. And I mean real experience. They also need to remember to value themselves and their work. And on the opposite side, management needs to understand how to see someone's worth, even if that person isn't running around talking about how great they are. Because anyone who's really good doesn't need to tell you they're good. You know they're good. You see it. Other people are telling you that so-and-so is good. And making sure that we don't stifle our own careers. And that's with the decisions we make. So maybe choosing the wrong degree, going to the wrong college, and then being set back as a result of that. Not going to college if that's appropriate. Now, there are plenty of instances where not going to college is a perfectly reasonable, proper thing to do. There are other instances where ideally you should go to college for a large variety of reasons. And you need to understand what that college is going to give you and what that college isn't going to give you, and do your homework. We, of course, you and I both were going to college around the time when a lot of people were getting swindled. And of course, it's gotten even worse since then, with these colleges charging insane amounts of money, ridiculous, obscene amounts of money, where the degree is simply not worth it.
Yeah, no, I agree. So all those points are very valuable points. And like I said, going back to making sure that you get a good foundation, making sure like, it doesn't matter, like if you would choose computer science, engineering, whatever it may be, those are all still good things. But having a good foundation is going to help you. It doesn't matter. Like if you can tie them into, per se, as we talk about on this channel, martial arts,
right.
Without a good foundation, you're not going to be a good martial artist.
Right.
There's no way. You have to have the skills, the fundamentals to be able to do what you want to do or be successful in what you're trying to do. Same thing here with security. You have to have those fundamentals.
Right.
They're very important in order for you to succeed. So that's all I wanted to really piggyback off on this particular segment. And I think the next segment, we will talk about more maybe the technical aspect. But in this segment, we just wanted to talk about the non-technical things that we see, and especially mistakes in our careers that may help your career and help you not make the same mistakes. So learn from us so you won't make the same mistakes. But other than that, if you don't have anything else, DaRon, I don't have anything else. I am Roniel.
I am DaRon.
And thank you for watching the Roniel and DaRon podcast show today. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next show.
Thank you. Have fun.